Well, thank you very much all for joining M&M Global and Maxus's discussion, and it's a wonderful topic. I love the theme, should the Festival of Media become the Festival of Technology? And technology is such a huge part of what we're talking about over these 2 days at the event. Let's just start with that opening question. Media as a thing, as an industry, as a name, as a sector, is it starting to lose relevance against technology? Should this be the Festival of Technology? I'll throw over to you guys. Anybody wants to take off from there?
I'd go with something that came out in the discussions that we had yesterday. I think no. I think there's obviously a place for more technology angles, and there's definitely some value around that. But the overarching media wrapper, I think, has probably never been more relevant. We've got a lot of tech conferences that happen globally. We've got some large ones here in Europe. We've got conferences in the States, and there's plenty we can all think of in that way. But it comes back to something that's been in discussion in the press for a good few months now. It's about ideas. It's about using technology to integrate with other channels and using that effectively, and using that in a very clever way. And lastly, using that in a way that differentiates yourself from the standard platforms that are out there in the market. And that's a key driver of the reason for media, right? There's a lot of standardization across, if you look at the MarTech landscape, the Lumascapes, all these tech logos, there's a lot of standardized offering out there. So media, for me, is the driver of differentiation. So it's able to pull out something different, and that's where the value is.
Sorry.
I agree. I think it's about we talk about the march of the machines. Everywhere we go. If any of you went to CES in January, what we saw was reality. That 3 years ago we were sitting there going, this is not particularly real. This is now becoming real. And the truth of the matter is, I agree that whilst it's all very well, the march of the machines, you need somebody to make some decisions. And I think it's that human brain that actually needs to make those decisions quite clearly. Is that right or wrong for the brand? Because otherwise, if you just pop it into the box and whether it's programmatic or whatever it is, out it pops, the answer may not be what you want to do or where you want to go. And I think it's still going to need that comms planning thinking, that structured process and understanding of the brand through the individuals and understand the consumer of that brand. And then make decisions that you may then well feed into the machines, whatever that machine. If we talk about televisions, they're not televisions anymore, they're communicators. You turn it on, they've got apps on them, they've got do pretty much anything on them. It's a box with a call that communicates. And I think it's then about understanding what you're trying to do and finding the right vehicle to deliver that.
Yeah. And technology, it's really an enabler. Yeah. And I think whether you're talking about it internally from a company standpoint, whether it's ad tech or any of the other myriad technologies that are available to us, they enable things. And I think on the consumer side too, it's interesting when you talked about your questionnaire. I thought to myself, I wonder what piece of technology is probably the thing that's worrying them is on the consumer side, is that the new behaviors that it's unleashing. And I say unleashing. Or again, enabling, because I think that those consumer behaviors, people have always wanted to do it. It's just that now they have a chance to actually do it. And I think the same thing with media. All the buzz about programmatic. Direct marketing industry has been doing this for 50 years. And the financial services industry has been doing the trading piece of it for 20, 30 years. Albeit with less powerful machines in the background. But again, I think on both sides, both the company and the consumer, it's technology is an enabler. And what's really interesting is how to connect, in that technology-enabled environment, whether you're talking about how you create content, whether you're talking about how you plan and place media. Those I think are the more interesting areas in terms of how we redefine media.
Yeah. This is music to my ears. And I think on paper it all sounds brilliant, and I thoroughly agree with it because I'm a strategist, I'm in the business of ideas, I'm in the business of joining things together. I guess the question that I'm kind of asking myself as I listen to this is whether in practice that's really what's happening today. Because I think my observation would be that I see the industry splitting in two. I see an industry which is about data and ad tech, and programmatic, is about delivering short-term sales, is about the ability to measure those sales to the nth degree, and is about precision and 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 guaranteed delivery. And on the other side, I see an industry which is about ideas and is about common cultural experiences and is about serendipity and is about driving culture. And at the moment, I don't necessarily believe that I'm seeing a lot of bridging between the two. What I see is I see the first one growing, and I see it growing, I think, at the expense of the second one. The implication of that is that we end up in a world where there are no brands because we've been so busy selling things on a month-to-month, week-to-week basis. And it needs to be solved. It needs to be, I think there are solutions to it, but I think we need to, rather than kid ourselves that there's this wonderful world that exists where everything works together, I don't think we're there yet. And I think we need to get there really quickly because the train has left the station.
I mean, that choices have proliferated, there is no doubt. And the point you made earlier about in this age when the options are virtually infinite, the role that in particular agencies can play to simplify that for their clients is ever increasing. And yet, by the same token, I think the agencies are sometimes their own worst enemies in actually adding to the proliferation in some cases. I just had a conversation earlier today with someone from a global network talking about yet 3 more products that they're sort of bringing into the market and thereby making my world more complicated. Yeah. When actually, really the value that I'm prepared to pay for and I want to pay for is that human intelligence to simplify the choices and enable quicker decision making.
Or provide clarity and direction, because I think simplification is too complex to be simplified, but you can be clear and you can say these are the things that are appropriate that you should do now.
Yeah, quick point. That's split in terms of that high accountability. As an industry, we've sold ourselves down a very perilous path. Internet is oversold in terms of accountability. That I firmly believe that. I think often in doing so, what we've done is it's the consultancy joke, the old one, where they borrow your watch, tell you the time, and give it back. In terms of metrics, there's something like that going on where we've bandied about the industry this do you know which 50% of your ad budgets are working, right? We've gotten down now the optimization fork is over optimized, is over accountable. Then the other side is what will then fall into branding / prospecting. So that's where the watch analogy comes in. So there's a number of sound bites that I use to try get people to think differently around this. Especially not everything that counts should be counted. All these things. It's for digital people that are grown up within agencies, within high tech environments, they oversell this function, the nature of the internet, that you can get the metrics easily, but they're not. But we know very well they're not often the right metrics, especially from a branding perspective. We know that we don't get the right metrics. Yeah. So, and that's hugely powerful. And then that fork that Nick you've set up there, that's revealing of we're reinventing something, and we're just adding a layer of metrics on top of it.
I think we as media people, we live in a bubble, and we really need to get out of that bubble. Yeah. Our God is the brand. If we don't sell the brand, we're all doomed. Yeah. Now, it's us to try and create those matrices to try and deliver that. The key thing is, I think, it's about long-term brand health. And at the moment, I think we're far too short-term. It's all about 31st December, have I made my budget? Well, the answer is, when I worked at a large FMCG company, we used to have 2 departments, brand building, brand development. Yeah. And one was basically about the long-term brand health, 5 years, up to that 5 years, and the guys were the in-year stuff. And I think in media we need to be doing the same thing. We need to be talking to marketeers about the long-term brand thinking, not, hey, if I bung on the programmatic, I can save you 10% tomorrow. The answer is, well, you go and talk to a marketeer, they quite frankly don't care about another couple of points of discount. You say to them, I'll guarantee you can get the point of share, then they suddenly become interested. Now, the art form is obviously then trying to create those media vehicles that deliver that point of market share. And to be honest, the complexities, as somebody put up yesterday, we're not data Jedis. Some of the things I saw this morning, you have to be a rocket scientist to do some of this stuff now. And the truth of the matter is, I've been in media all my life, And we're expected to know this backwards, inside out, and unless you keep yourself up to date, you're gone very quickly, or you just lose it. And marketeers are asking, how about this, how about that? There's lots of shiny things out there that are being waved around. They go, well, I can't have a Facebook page. Well, probably because your brand doesn't probably suit it.
Aren't we answering the question then? So if the headline question is, should we change the name of the Festival of Media to the Festival of Technology, I think it's a resounding no, right?
Yeah.
But if you're asking the question to prompt a broader debate about the role of technology and what we're doing, then yeah. And I think that it's very easy to get sucked into the weeds of what is possible, and I think the only way that we retain our sanity is by stepping back and looking at what the higher purpose is.
Absolutely.
We're never going to solve the short-termism that happens to be very prevalent in our industries at the moment. We might as well be debating the root causes of capitalism. We're never going to solve that. But I think it's a resounding no to, can you imagine a group of white goods manufacturers sitting somewhere going, should we change the name of our conference from the white goods blah 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 to the technology one? No, the car makers aren't doing that. I think it's a bit of a wake-up call in that technology has disrupted a huge number of industries, and the disruption has been very, very clear to see if you were a Kodak or a Borders or a any one of those, or a Blockbuster. What we're starting to see is that technology is a very real, we thought we were a bit immune to that, I think, for a while as a big CPG company. But I think that technology is beginning to disrupt our industries, but in a more kind of subtle way. So e-commerce, for example, is starting to become a big issue for us. And we're now beginning to embrace that change and saying, well, if digital technology is going to be a disruptor to our industry, then let's identify where those points of disruption are going to be, and let's embrace those and move forward with them. But I think the only way that you can make strategic decisions is step back and say, fundamentally, we need to understand how people buy stuff, right? Let's not forget that. And an integral part of that is building brands for the long term. But then in the short term, are there ways of leveraging technology in order to help us gain an edge here or there?
Damian, if I could just make one quick point and I'll come back to you. And just a sort of observation, I think there's a lot of consensus about the fact that there is a need for change, that these things are happening, that our industries are being disrupted. But who should take the leading role in leading into this new path? There's sort of an arms race, it feels like at times, with these ad tech stacks that are kind of building that. Who should be leading this? Who should be in control of this? Is it the brands themselves? Is it agencies? Is it these other tech industries that, the Lumascape you look at, all these various companies? Who should be kind of holding the leading role?
I think the points you made, Jee, were very, very relevant. I think it's the agent, everybody has to work together, but it is the agency's role to decomplex the system. I also feel that it's very easy to use technology as a sort of like an antidote to some of the challenges, and it's very easy to apply new products. But every dollar you spend on tech, you can't spend on media. And media is the thing that makes the connection with the audience. So anytime any tech is layered in, it needs to have a return on investment for that specific technology. And I take your point about we need to look further into the long term. I think the other thing we need to think about is how to make the technology as accessible as possible. Because I think if you're going to deploy something like a data management platform, you're in for millions of dollars, and you don't know what the return on the investment is on that straight away.
And counting.
Yeah,
and that's a major hurdle.
Yeah,
it's already well say I worked when I was at FMG company where there's large amounts of cash. When you're working for a middle-sized company or a large company in the sector I'm in, you walk into the board and these guys will say, actually, I need a startup of 10 million. They look at you as if you're insane.
Yeah.
What's the matter with television?
And it's got to justify.
Yeah. And what are we going to get back? And the answer is, this is the touch points that your consumers are in now. And a lot of people, they're run by accountants. The financials are tight, so they're saying, well, if I'm going to give you $1 million, am I going to get 1.2 back? And you do the econometrics, and we're very similar to an FMCG company. It's 30 cents on the dollar on the short term, about 1.30 in the long term. They're going, you're asking for a lot of money, and it tends to, and I always say, unless you've got the buy-in from the very top of the business, you're banging your head against the wall. I mean, having spent some time trying to drive these processes through, unless you've got the guy at the top going, this is a great idea, you are going to struggle.
Or the other thing we've been doing, I hear you, and I've been in some of those discussions, is to try and make it as accessible as possible by changing the model that some of these tech are awarded in. It's always been cost per thousand, it's been percentage of net media and things on DSPs, things like that. The data management platform is the only tool where you have to be writing the big checks and you don't know whether you've got it back. So we're just in the process of closing a deal where we can make a DMP available to clients on a pay-as-you-go basis, on a CPM basis, just like an ad server. It's a new model. We'll just have to see how it goes, but it'll mean that it's more accessible.
Just a tiny bit provocative, if I may, and going back to the question about who should be responsible for, I can't remember exactly how it was phrased, but owning the change. I think the minute that Sheryl Sandberg walked into Facebook and turned it into a money-making operation by turning it into an advertising platform, I think there was a bit of a switch that happened in the business, in that a lot of the landscape became much more familiar again, because we started to talk about volumes of people and scale and ad products, and the thing that's really dawned on us is that if you talk to tech companies, or you talk to the platforms, or you talk to agencies, it always ends up back with clients, right? We can't get our tagging on X platform, or we can't do this, or we need to standardize the viewability.
Or Google won't agree to this term or that term.
And in a way, I think that's not because they don't want to, but I think agencies have fallen off the pace a little. I think the desire is there, but I think the enormity, if you look at the market capitalization of companies like Google and Facebook, they dwarf us. We thought we were big companies. They're 20, 30 or 40 times our size. And so I think that the rise of these new singular, high volume, extremely powerful players has meant that we're having to do more top to tops. And ultimately, what's the currency and lifeblood of this system? It's our dollars, right? So I think that clients need to own it. The days of going, you know what, I'm going to call my agency up and let them figure it out. I think those days are gone, really. Not because they don't have the capabilities, but because we can speak from a greater position of strength. Quite often we can negotiate better deals directly. And it pains me to say it, having worked in agencies for half my career, but the level of trust that we have in agencies to do the right thing for us is different now, I think, than it was 20 years ago. And it's not because agencies are deliberately trying to mislead us, but you have demands of shareholders, right? You've got probably more pressing demands than maybe even we do, and we know what it's like to have very pressing demands. So I think that clients need to own the problem, and I think that clients need to build their capabilities, and I think they really need to lean into the problem.
Nice use of lean in. So I think if I chime in on that one, I add another dimension to that. I think disruption has just started. I think this explosion we're seeing, guys like Scott Brinker, his update to his MarTech landscape. We've seen the number of logos grow, not quite exponentially, but by huge volume year on year. I think therein lies an opportunity for the strengthening of partnership between client and agency from that dimension, because there's a lot of new logos, as in the industry jargon, and to decomplexify that function in terms of helping make sense of this new landscape, tech-driven, is it's a full-time job. It really is. It's a full-time job. It should be left to the experts. Consultancies in the 80s and 90s around technology more generally, IT, as it was a big IT label. That was largely their job. They set up the deals, and in much the same way that that is quite likely the new role for one of the new roles for the agency of the future. But I think also in navigating the various partnerships that sit between the customer, the behaviors, and the technology, there are all these intermediaries, all trying to take their cut.
Yep.
And again, there's opportunity for better management of that value chain. And again, being a client, that's an area of expertise in and unto itself. So there's definitely a role from that side. So I think, definitely valid remarks around the relationship. But there are dimensions where you could also quite easily argue that never before have required a trusting relationship with an agency. So the requirement for that trusting relationship is very high.
I also think the majority of marketers, for most of their working life, have worked on agency fees of 3%, roughly 2%, 3%, 4%, whatever it is, for what I call offline media. So that's the norm. In their brain, they're going 3%. When you start cutting the tech stack cost up, you've got server costs, you've got this, you've got that, verification, and suddenly you're cracking up some big numbers. They're going, this is insane. Why are we going to do that? And we go, well, because this, that, and the other. You justify the use of why you're doing it. That really is another big hurdle. I think somehow we've got to try and clear all these layers out and say, very simplistic. In the old days, you bought a page, that gave you the magazine, there it is, job done. The complexities are far more in tech. Lots of clients I've spoken to are struggling with the actual cost of just doing it.
But it's a shifting of agency service, isn't it? It's your expectations of what an agency delivers.
Exactly.
To simplify, I think that was a great way of putting it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. My sort of take on my answer to your question would be sort of pulling from various things that have been said. You talk about sort of the accountability of technology-driven media actually driving brand short-termism versus really building health in the long term, and I completely agree with that. And so my response on sort of who's going to break this current paradigm that we're all hurtling towards would be actually the consumer, because ultimately, the great brands will have customers making irrational decisions, not just the rational ones. And so if we start seeing our brands lose that equity and that sort of power in the long term, I think that will drive all of us, client, agency, media owner, all towards rebuilding that. And I think that in this, so the role that the client plays is absolutely, to sort of be steward and guardian of that brand. And the media agencies in particular have a unique role of adding, a certain value that the client teams themselves are not capable of doing at the moment. Although it was interesting, the speaker, the producer from Hollywood, was talking about increasingly trying to sort of circumvent agencies and go directly to the brands and to the marketers, which is increasingly a trend. So I think there is really a call to arms to the media industry, I'm speaking of the agencies, to actually, in some ways refute that and restate the value that you bring to the table.
But are we hiding from the horrible truth of the cost of doing digital isn't 3%, whichever way you cut it? Let me want to say that.
But let me rephrase the question just a bit, because I've been conscious in the room and also in previous months that I don't think we've addressed the question back to the agencies. Do you feel more empowered as a partner in this, or do you feel disempowered through technology? I'd love to, because we've spent a lot of time with Facebook and Google and people like that, and we know how that's changing us. And I'm not 100% sure how it's changing you guys. Do you feel better? Do you feel worse? Do you feel... That's right, I know I'm doing this partly for my debate in about an hour's time.
I think from a...
But seriously, how does it make you feel?
I personally, I think it's fantastic. I think the reason it's fantastic is not necessarily because of what the technology can do. It's because it's a particularly complex marketplace. And where you have complexity and where you have things which are changing very, very significantly, you can differentiate. Most of us here, I think, are old enough to know what life was like before the technology existed. It was whoever had the most money won. They got the most points. Whereas here, we have the opportunity, if you get the strategy right, you have the opportunity to differentiate. It's very hard to know what to do because of the ambiguity, but a complex, difficult marketplace is the one where a brand can get ahead without having to outspend anybody else.
And I'll just add a little bit to that as well. I guess our job is about mastery on a client's behalf. And I think going back 10, 15, when this festival started 10 years ago, I think we were very comfortable with our mastery of the vendors who we could reach, all the people we needed to reach on your behalf. And I would say that is less so now, because we look at, let's talk about the Lumascape, a chart, how many of those companies have I heard of, and I know what they actually do? I mean, obviously there's some specialists that clearly are all on top of that, but the further you go up in sort of general management and an agency, you can be slightly further away from it, and that is a little bit unsettling, I have to say. So there's lots of people out there doing very specialist things, huge amounts of overlap, which is why not a lot of those companies will be necessarily around in a year, 2 years' time. But I think what you're looking for generally is that mastery, and yes, it is incumbent on us to retake that.
Well, so if I can add to that, is it the client who leads it? Is the agency who leads it? I think it's probably more client-led, but it's a partnership. But I think both sides, especially in an environment where you have this proliferation of technology options, different categories of technology, different vendors. It reminds me of like we've been through this before. It's like the Matrix. So we had the first .com bubble, where you have just this Chicken Little syndrome, or what I like to call the digital ninja syndrome, is and agencies are complicit in doing this, is they build up the hype machine. And for me, the biggest problem, inside, we might cut this part. The biggest problem inside my company is dealing with our own marketers who, and they mean very well. They hear about this new thing. Oh, there's programmatic. Oh, it's a new shiny thing. Oh, wait, can you make it viral and free? Or, everything has to be on Facebook. We've got to do this Facebook thing. And I agree, you guys have to have a degree of mastery in those areas. But you've got to, the hype machine has got to, calm down a little bit. And in conversations with our big scale partnerships, a couple of which have been mentioned so far, my biggest issue with them is that they are in and adding to the hype machine, and it just operationally it makes things very hard, because I think that's, at the end of the day, that's the biggest challenge, is to turn the ship and then to get the education.
But that's the role of strategy, is to stop that from happening. And to answer the question, my job hasn't changed. I've been a kind of comms planner, strategist for some time now. If you ask me to define what media planning is, my definition is it's the art of telling people that you love them without using words. And that hasn't changed. In fact, it's become an awful lot richer, because I have a much better understanding of humanity than I've ever had before. And all those ludicrous, old school, syndicated systems are becoming increasingly irrelevant, and I have a million other things that I can use instead that give me a genuine understanding of real people and how they live their lives. And that is awesome. And what it means is that actually I'm no longer confined by channel selection, because actually digitally I can hit people during times or places or moments, and I can get very purely into receptivity, where there was always a compromise in the past. So that's wonderful. And then finally, when you come to idea creation, anything's possible. And so, the ability to create old channels out of new materials is tremendously exciting. No one's really doing it much, but it's there and it's possible now. So for me, it's that the smorgasbord is increased. The opportunity is fabulous, but I could be much more precise, much more proven, but also much more creative in the way that I approach it. It's a wonderful thing. You just have to forget a lot of the old ways of thinking about stuff, because the box exists in your own mind, and too many people spend too long having all that stuff drilled into them so they can't think away from it.
I second that, and I'd say I'd go stronger than tech as an enabler. It's really revealing new behaviors. I think there's a slight nuance there that gets you far more into a creative space than into a tech platform-led solution. The other thing I was thinking of around this discussion is we've got ourselves into a big mess around and also around the value of agency client partner through what I believe are badly thought ideas around paid, owned, and earned, for example. This idea that you've got earned media, free media, organic, partly driven by Web 2.0 conversation, but also hyped by the logos on the Lumascape and other industry overviews. The coming together of a paradigm like that, paid, owned, and earned, together with technology, is a really dangerous thing because what we have is a badly run client will think, well, I'll do this free, I'll take this in-house. It's the biggest myth ever, right? It's publishing, media relations, media owners drive the distribution. Absolutely, it's a monetized world we live in, and one should accept that. Of course, there's always some notional thing around advocacy, earned media, but we're counting stuff that is and isn't important, but we're placing far too much emphasis on that.
I'm afraid to say we are unfortunately running out of time, so we're going to have to come round to you for last comments. It's absolutely flown by. Just to sort of perhaps simplify a little bit in terms of getting final thoughts. If there's one area that you hope that by the next time we congregate here in Rome or wherever else that Charlie wants to take us, what do you hope will have improved in terms of the way media and technology are integrated, the way that brands are using it, the way that agencies are using it? Starting with you, Jee, and working around clockwise.
This is my first festival and only sort of halfway through the first day for the first half. But I'd say that what I've noticed is the absence of conversations around consumers and consumer insight. It seems to be focused a lot more on, as much as this discussion has been as well, on whether we call them revealers or enablers, but the platforms, and actually the ideas that I think there is in a world where we're fast changing a role for call them old-fashioned if you like, but actually the basics, the fundamental basics of what make our marketing and our industry, and so that was what I would.
Okay. So Jee, I'll second that. I think not falling down the technology rabbit hole, and seeing more of what we've seen. Yesterday, I was fortunate to be on a judging panel and seeing stuff like what's come out of Romania, for example. Markets where we might not necessarily look to for ideas. Great idea-led campaigns, idea at the forefront, at the epicenter, doing fantastic work. So I think seeing more of that is encouraging.
I think your point about hype was very well made. I would like to see very much less hype. I would also like to see a rationalisation of the number of companies which are out there with these tech companies. I think that they should be evaluated based on their business contribution, and I think that will show up which ones actually make a difference, which ones don't. I really hope the rationalisation isn't painful for anybody who's in there, and I hope it doesn't rationalise too much, because it's always good to have choice. And so we'll see where we get to.
I'll make mine short and sweet. I would say by this time next year, I'm hoping that people will realise that they shouldn't panic. Keep their eyes on the prize, what is ultimately the end goal. And for us, it's selling more stuff to more people. And I think in order to do that, like anything else in life, really being clear about what sort of operator you want to be in that space. Do you want to be a purveyor of fantastic creativity or technology or build brands? Be very true to who you are, I think, and I think that will allow you to navigate the complexity of this landscape.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's very simple. More people doing more joined up thinking. And that's it.
I think you're right. I think all of us in this room cover multiple countries. And when you're trying to deal with 50 to 80 countries with a vast range of capability, it's realising you do need to build digital capability matrices. What works in Northern Europe isn't going to work in Ecuador. And I think it's the agency team trying to cleave us. It's almost like cartoon-like, pushing the agency team into the minefield, clear the mines and help us through. I think it's about that clarity of, okay, always building global. Does it actually get down to local? Is it actually executable? I think it's giving that advice to turn around and say, okay, guys, works here. You need to adapt there. It's that adaptability of the original plan, and I think is that capability for matrix. It's getting that cascade into the market.
I think for me, it's if I look at the kind of the technology theme that we're here today, I would love to see us move the tech conversation beyond, basically what the direct marketers have been doing for years. So if you go look at there's all the theory and the promise of data and programmatic, but you go look at it and you're like, that's, they took this product and they combined it with that product and they threw a banner at you. Like where can, and it's almost like from a creativity standpoint, at least in the programmatic space, it's like tech is dreck creatively. And so how can we get to something that's actually much more creative and responsive? And it just struck me in a lot of the cases that we looked at, there was a thing that Burger King that had done that was sort of interesting, but when you actually scratch the surface, you were like, oh, that could have been done well, but it wasn't great. I would love to see things that get us to that level of, responsiveness. That's and precision. That's the promise of programmatic, but with just some better degree of creativity and insight and things that people actually want to look at.
Yeah, I'm doing a lot of work in that, so we can have a chat later. Interested in that space.
Thank you, guys. Thank you all very much for taking the time, and the real checklist where we can hold the industry to account next year and see how we're doing. Thank you, and see you at the Festival of Media, as it will hopefully still be called next year.